Okay, so this is video response number 2. Hello again at DJW. Now, as I explained previously, there are actually two different issues that I want to discuss here, and I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to go about releasing this content to YouTube, but I do know that I want to give each different issue its own respective segment, and that the first segment will be dedicated to discussing the various definitions you provided for the term person. Because I think that if you follow these through, and you look at the absurd conclusions that they force us to accept, the individual people they force us to exclude, the items they force us to include, you will find some cognitive dissonance within your own philosophy. I don't think that you are a sociopath. I don't think that you have some kind of bizarre or warped moral perspective. So I am forced to conclude that you have simply adopted, like so many other people, the generic regurgitated definitions for the term person that have been provided by the pro-choice side of the abortion debate, but that don't actually pragmatically work when applied to individual examples. So what I want to do is I want to take these definitions and I want to follow them through. I want to talk them through with you and look at some of the things that would be a person if we accept these definitions, and some of the persons that would not be persons if we accepted the definitions that you provided. And there were actually several, so I'm going to look at each individually, and then at the end I'm going to look at it comprehensively, as though all the different characteristics you listed together were a part of the same definition. Now, at many different points in your video, and in many different ways, you claimed that it was our intelligence which identifies us as persons. And you used a number of closely related terms and synonyms to stress this repeatedly. You said rationality, you said logic, you said reason. Obviously, these are all closely interlocked concepts, but in the end, no combination of these characteristics can be said to be the attribute which identifies us uniquely as persons, because if that were the case, then we would have to exclude everybody who is asleep, and I would stop being a person whenever I lay down for bed at night. Because when you are asleep, your brain is resting, and your higher thought is more or less shut down. You don't have your rationality, you don't have your logic, you don't have your reason, and you don't have your intelligence when you are sleeping. And this is true to an even greater degree of individuals on general anesthetics. But you're not going to say that because I've gone in for a surgery that I am no longer a person. And if a doctor, while I'm on this operating table, decides to stab me in the throat with a scalpel, you're not going to say that he killed an object. No, you're going to say that he murdered a person, because I am still a person, even though the general anesthetics has more or less shut down all of the higher functions in my brain. We also know that in states of emotional shock or panic, individuals often abandon any semblance of their intelligence. For example, I am terrified of the ocean, and I am terrified of water in general. So if you kidnapped me, and if you threw me out into the Pacific, I would probably panic. I would not have any coherent thought. I would not be able to reason my way out of that situation. I would not have my logic. I would not have my reason or rationality. I would abandon all of these things in a state of extreme fear. So you're not going to say that I'm no longer a person because I'm floating around out in the ocean. Location has nothing to do with who is and who is not a person. If you take me and you put me anywhere, I am still a person. I don't stop being a person because you've moved me from point A to point B. So it's not intelligence which identifies us as persons. It's not reason, it's not logic, it's not rationality. And if it were any of these things, while you would have to exclude sleeping individuals, you would have to include calculators and computers. Computers have intelligence, albeit artificial intelligence. I don't think that it should have to be biological. If the intelligence is important, then the source should not be. And a calculator can in fact reason its way through an algebraic expression. So calculators, computers, these have intelligence, they have rationality, they have reason, they have logic, they have all of these things, and yet they're not persons. And if you destroy one of them, you're not a murderer. If you get mad after failing your math test and you smash your calculator onto the floor and you stomp it, I'm not going to say that you killed a person. And neither are you. Because that's not a person, even though it is intelligent, even though it can reason, even though it does have logic and rationality, it is not a person. So none of these characteristics that we have so far discussed can be what uniquely defines us as persons. At many different points you also claimed that it was emotions which identify us as persons. But we know that animals, and not just higher animals like dolphins or apes, but lower animals like cats and dogs do have emotions. I'm not sure where this myth that only people can feel came from. It's not true. Animals have emotions. They have fear. They have affection. Yet we're not going to give Rover the same moral standing, the same legal standing as his owner. Otherwise, he wouldn't be property. So it's not emotions which identifies us as persons. We do know, however, that there are individuals who, in response to extreme stress or trauma, will revert or will descend into a state of psychological shock where they become emotionally numb. Yet, they're still persons, and if you kill somebody in this state, if you kill somebody who is traumatized, it's still murder. You said that it was our self-awareness, but there have been a number of studies, I may be able to provide the URL for at least one, that show animals of various species are very cognizant of their own existence. Whereas again, if we're on general anesthetics or we're asleep, we may not be. And indeed, there are some religions which claim we don't exist. The Hindus believe that we are illusions. So they're not really self-aware. They're denying their own existence. They're not aware that they exist. Therefore, it is not self-awareness which identifies us as persons. Otherwise, we're going to have to exclude the Hindus, we're going to have to include animals, and we're going to have to exclude individuals who are sleeping once again. You claim that it was our unique persona, but animals have personalities. They have their own unique individual characteristics, so it's not this either. On the other hand, people who are on general anesthetics, once again, are all more or less the same. And when we are put in certain situations, we often abandon our character continuity, and we don't behave like ourselves. So this cannot be what identifies us as persons. And the last dodge is to claim it is some unique combination of all of these things put together. But if that is the case, then any organism which is at a lack of any of these characteristics ceases to be a person. For example, a laptop is not a person because it doesn't have emotions. An animal is not a person because it doesn't have intelligence. But let's consider that. That means that if you're sleeping and you don't have intelligence, you're not a person. Or if you're emotionally numb from a trauma, you are no longer a person. If you lose any one of these characteristics, you are not a person. So if you have to have all of these characteristics, then most of us aren't people anymore. Most of us are objects or animals at best. So none of these things can be the defining attribute of a person. And I think that if you consider this in your own philosophy, you will find the cognitive dissonance, because I do not think that you are going to say that starving African orphans or the Jews at Auschwitz or sleeping individuals are not persons and should not have rights. So thank you for viewing my video, and I hope that my next video response will be a little more economical.